This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Riley Laychuk. Janet is away. A Winnipeg-based job training program that helps people overcome employment barriers will soon be back up and running. Build Inc. was forced to close at the end of last year after failed funding negotiations with the province. But now the province has changed its mind. CBC's Brittany Greenslade has more.
It's been a long few weeks for Sean Hogan and his team at Build Inc. after having to close up shop on its training program right after Christmas.
It was heartbreaking because training has been like our heart and soul for a long time, like since we were founded in 2006.
Today, his heart is full. The province has come to the table with a $285,000 bridge grant. That means training can resume next month.
Build is back.
Hogan says it will allow 9 people to go through the roughly 4-month program, and he's hopeful they may receive money through another provincial initiative, which would let them train another 61 this year.
It means food on the table for so many families. It means a paycheck for people who have never earned a paycheck. It means that there's people who want to make a change in their life, and maybe this Christmas they're not going to be locked up, but they're going to be with their kids.
Over the past 16 years, roughly 1,000 people have gone through the program, which works with people facing barriers to employment and trains them to do interior renovations. Each trainee is also paid during that time, and they help them find jobs afterwards.
Every day, 1 to 5 people will reach out to us asking for an opportunity, and us having to say no was really, really difficult. But now we're going to be able to change that story.
It's a program that changed Kendra Amo's life 4 years ago.
If it wasn't for that training program, then I really wouldn't be here.
The now 25-year-old was struggling with addiction at the time and never found a place where she fit in until Build.
I was a foster care kid, and it was hard enough with that, with people always seeing me as a foster care kid. And then I came here and they were like, hey, well, let's see what you can do, and it was nice, someone to believe in me and stuff like that.
Now she's excited to give back to others who started out just like her.
It's really exciting. I can't wait, to see all these people. Like, what if, I see myself in somebody and it's like, hey, man, I know what it's like, and this place will really, really be able to help you.
Brittany Greenslade, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The province says a pay increase for disability workers should stabilize the workforce. The provincial government revealed new details about the $104 million in new funding for disability services announced in the budget earlier this month. More than $80 million will be spent to increase support for workers' pay. The hourly rate could increase from $15 an hour to $19. The wage increase will get support workers to stay in the field longer and attract new people to the field. Scott Smith's son has an intellectual disability. He knows that as he and his wife age, they'll be unable to care for their son, and the history of instability in the disability support workforce worries him.
Families worry about their loved ones and harm that may come to them. But today brings me hope. Brings us a major step closer in reducing individuals' and families' fears. It gives us hope that there'll be protection rooted in positive regard and relationships between support worker and person receiving supports.
Before the pandemic, a person with disabilities could have more than 770 different workers come in and out of their life. That number increased during the pandemic. Well, the city's budget is almost finished. Mayor Scott Gillingham's Inner Circle met today to hash out some last-minute changes. Let's bring in CBC's Cameron McLean live in the newsroom now to go over some of the highlights. So, Cam, it's been more than a month now since the release of the draft budget. Walk us through what's happened since.
The biggest change is the thawing of the freeze on provincial grants to the city. Last month, the province announced it would increase the city's grant for the first time since 2017. That means the city has $16.7 million more in its operating budget. Most of that money is going to 2 areas. $4.6 million will go to replenish the city's fiscal stabilization fund. It's also using $11.4 million to reduce the corporate efficiencies target. This is the amount of money the city needs to save this year. It's now $22.1 million. Finance Chair Jeff Brawadi says this will take some pressure off city departments.
Again, we're always looking for our departments to run efficiently as possible, but we've had issues in the past where sometimes difficult decisions have been made that have perhaps affected services, and we've hopefully eliminated that by doing this.
Did Executive Policy Committee members decide to increase funding anywhere?
Councillors don't have much room to add items to the budget. The city racked up a record deficit of $83 million last year, but they did find some extra money. They added $150,000 for lifeguard recruitment and retention. There's $100,000 to reverse a planned cut to funding for library materials, and they added $50,000 to avoid cutting the operating hours at the downtown public washroom. They also added $450,000 to pay for soil remediation at two sites where they found high lead levels. These are Weston Memorial Community Center Hockey Rink and Mission Park. Mayor Gillingham says this gives the city an opportunity to address something of public concern.
We want to make sure that the sites that we are using for recreational purposes are in good condition. And so this is an investment that is, I think, really important and the public would expect.
So Cameron, what happens next?
Well, the budget isn't finished yet. It goes for a final vote at council tomorrow. Riley?
Thank you, Cameron. That's CBC City Hall reporter Cameron McLean in the newsroom tonight. Four nurses have resigned from the province's sexual assault examination program. The revelation was made public by Manitoba's health minister this afternoon. The program has faced staffing shortages, creating concern that some survivors are unable to access timely care. And as CBC's Josh Crabb reports, the health minister is blaming management for the resignations.
It's a development Health Minister Audrey Gordon called unacceptable. Speaking to reporters after question period, Gordon says she learned a number of sexual assault nurse examiners have resigned. The forensic nurses based at Health Sciences Centre work on a casual basis to support survivors of sexual assault and collect evidence that can be used in investigations. Health Sciences Centre Executive Director of Acute Health Services, Jennifer Cumsty, told reporters 4 of 13 casual nurses resigned. The minister says she holds health system leaders accountable. Gordon says the shifts in the sexual assault examination program need to be filled because the government has provided funding for the positions to make sure coverage is provided 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
I find this to be unacceptable, and that this is not aligned with our government's commitment to Manitobans who experience trauma such as sexual assault.
Cumsty says the program has historically been staffed by casual nurses, but now has full-time positions. 6 of those 7 positions have been hired. The nurses who have been working in the program have told CBC staff are giving up personal time to keep the program running. No specifics were provided Tuesday on how many hours each day coverage will be provided given these resignations. Officials say they're putting backup coverage plans in place by turning to remaining casual nurses and physicians to pick up shifts. Cumsty says 24/7 coverage hasn't been guaranteed, but they're still striving for that despite the recent departures.
None of us are satisfied with a program that allows for gaps in these services or that requires patients to wait.
Health officials say they're working on hiring more nurses, but those nurses will need time to get up to speed on the program. They say they're confident on plans underway to build a service that will make the program more reliable for everyone. Josh Crabb, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Well, shock and disgust, that is what a Toulon family felt when they found bed bugs in their hotel room at the Canad Inns that's connected to the Health Sciences Centre. Whitney Bergstrom's son was at HSC for a medical procedure last week, and they rented a room at the hotel so they could stay there while he recovered. She says within a couple of days, her husband was covered with bites. Bergstrom says they were offered another room, but she says they expected the hotel to have higher standards.
The bugs were coming out of the hole in the mattress, that he was catching them in a cup. I'm speechless, truthfully. And with everything going on, it was just something we didn't really need to deal with. Because then you're worrying about tracking them. Are they in our clothes? Are they in our bags?
Shared Health says the hospital has a process it follows to prevent bed bugs infestations and says they do specialized cleaning if they find evidence of bed bugs. But the hotel is independently owned and not run by the hospital. We did reach out to Canadians for a response but have not heard back. A number of tenants at the Windsor Hotel in downtown Winnipeg were forced out after provincial health inspectors declared the building too filthy and unsafe. The hotel was closed down after a health hazard order was issued. Officials say tenants were relocated. Some had to go to shelters until more permanent housing could be found. An inspection of the hotel 3 weeks ago found an accumulation of dirt, broken windows, doors, plumbing fixtures, and heating problems. The province says new owners were working with the old owners to secure the building. Winnipeg's Iranian community celebrated its New Year last night, and with anti-government protests still sweeping the country, the celebration felt different for many. CBC's Joanne Roberts has the story.
The smell of fresh flowers filled the air as hundreds of Iranians gathered to celebrate Nowruz. Traditions like Haftin and traditional Iranian music were present to bring a bit of Iran to Winnipeg.
Nowruz is the most important day on the Iranian calendar.
It's just a time to celebrate and start a new year with our friends and family.
For some, the significance of a new beginning was especially important this year.
I feel like this year is a little more important to celebrate it because we've been through so much hardship and so much mourning and so much anger.
The decision whether to celebrate the new year was not an easy one to make. With anti-regime protests and a government crackdown sweeping Iran, community leaders left the decision to its members.
Even though it's very hard for us, but we want to make sure to safeguard all these traditions and make sure people have a chance to get together.
But Aryanpour says it also wanted Iran's fight against the Islamic Republic to be at the center of the celebration. After the September death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, protests sparked all around the world. Their rallying cry, woman, life, freedom.
This year, Nowruz is another chance to keep fighting after 6 months of severe fighting against a ruthless regime.
This is why the hope from Iranians this coming year is for freedom and peace for their home country.
We are hoping that the government change back home, that everything going to go in a peaceful manner.
Hoping that in this new year we reach the happiness and the freedom in Iran.
We are hoping that the Woman, Life, Freedom Revolution will change things in Iran and will turn Iran into an Iran which is free, equal for all Iranians.
Organizers say yesterday's celebration was dedicated to all the people fighting for a hopeful new year. Joanne Roberts, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The Winnipeg Art Gallery Kumayuk has hired a new assistant curator for Indigenous and contemporary art. And her plan is to change how people think about what Indigenous art is. CBC's Nampande Londe visited her at the museum.
We like to stop here at the Visible Vault because there are about 500 shelves full of Inuit carvings, and they're all organized by community.
Marianne Redhead is looking forward to doing things differently. Less than 1% of the art in the Winnipeg Art Gallery is by First Nation or Métis artists. Redhead wants to change that. She wants to bring in more art by Indigenous artists who are from the Treaty Territories in Manitoba. She says she loves when she's giving a tour of Kamayuk and someone recognizes a piece of art made by a family member.
That is my hope too, is that people will come and see something that their relative made and just get really inspired and excited by that. And that, of course, means that we do need to expand our collection.
The 31-year-old doesn't have an extensive art history background, but she was involved in a renaming art project at the WAG. She researched pieces featuring Indigenous people that had offensive titles and brought in Indigenous elders and knowledge keepers who renamed the artworks.
It was one of the most meaningful experiences of my life.
Redhead says her approach to curating is twofold. She wants to include works that challenge the colonial narrative. She uses this piece as an example. Robert Hoole did his own version of the death of General Wolfe and added a Delaware man into the painting.
So this is, evoking the notion that Indigenous folks were always there, always, and we have our own histories.
Redhead also wants to focus more on hope and joy in Indigenous art and what the future looks like for Indigenous peoples.
I think there's a time and place, and there needs to be space for those to, for trauma and to grieve and all that. And I want to make space for that too, but there's also moving forward and looking forward, I think, to the future, because we are very strong and we have overcome a lot and we will continue to do so.
Redhead knows she has a huge responsibility to connect with young Indigenous artists and include them in the art gallery. Nampande Lande, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Meteorologist John Sauder joins us with the forecast now. You were mentioning some snow in parts of the viewing area yesterday.
Yeah.
And it looks like that's coming to fruition.
Yeah, it is right on track, and we've got weather alerts to prove it and radar that'll show you exactly where the snow is right now. First of all, the weather alerts. Now, in the southeast corner of Manitoba, Piney, down through Sprague, Buffalo Point, northwest angle. Special weather statement in effect, and this is talking about this snow to the amount of about 5 to 10 centimeters. Not a huge amount, but at this time of year, it does warrant a special weather statement, and we could see some pretty dicey driving on, say, Highway 12 down through this area tonight and through about the first half of tomorrow. Now, farther east, we've got 15 to 20 centimeters. In some locations, more like 25 centimeters on the way. So a couple of different warnings here. This is a snowfall warning. So speaking more to the amount of snow, the white shaded area is a winter weather advisory, and it's speaking more to how the snow and wind will interact to create some nasty driving conditions. Right now in Winnipeg, we're at -3, north winds at 17. Our wind chill not really all that bad right now. We do have the cloud cover that has been kind of sneaking up on us all day today, and a few light flurries west of the Red River Valley and along the international border. But you look at a little bit farther south, and this is the more organized snow moving out of South Dakota now into North Dakota and eventually right through northern Minnesota and into northwestern Ontario tonight and through the day tomorrow. So let's put a stop on Futurecast right in the middle of the night. 2 in the morning Wednesday. Winnipeg's in the snow, but like I was saying yesterday, I think just right on the western periphery, and the heavier snowfall is out through Kenora, International Falls, Fort Francis, Sioux Lookout, and then on into the morning, we have some leftover flurries here, and the accumulating snow is still falling in northwestern Ontario. Then on into the afternoon, we're into some sunny breaks. And then on Thursday, as we move on into the afternoon, it becomes quite sunny with high pressure kind of taking over as we head into the end of the week, bringing lots of sunshine. So 24-hour snow potential here, and the latest run took Winnipeg from 2 centimeters to 6. I think 6 is a little much. I'm thinking 2, maybe 3 centimeters. 8 in Piney. I think Sprague will be around 10, Kenora 15, and then you've got the 20s and 25s when you look at Dryden and Fort Francis, or 24 in Fort Francis. So again, a lot of this is out to the south and east of us. Call it a near miss. We're still going to get some snow here in the Winnipeg area. With the cloud tonight, only dropping to -8. Tomorrow morning, -7. A few leftover flurries. And then we'll start to see those clouds breaking up a little bit in the afternoon with a northwest breeze at 25 to 30. And then some sunshine, and we start to warm up. It's going to be breezy on Friday, though. And Riley, I've changed the forecast a little bit for Saturday. Put the cloud back in, and there's a slight chance of flurries on Saturday, but not a whole lot of snow.
I know you'll be watching it for us, John. Thank you.
Thanks.
Canada's inflation rate slowed again in February, but grocery prices continue to go up. We'll have the latest on what that means for interest rates when we come back. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. Canada's inflation rate eased again in February. Statistics Canada reports it dipped to 5.2%. That is down from 5.9% in January. Canadians got some more relief at the gas pump, but food prices are still rising by double digits, and that is causing a strain. CBC's Nisha Patel has more.
It's tough not to notice higher food prices, especially for those running this Toronto food bank.
Cooking oil is way high, and some cases almost double. And rice is going up, sugar is going up, flour is going up.
Here, it's the busiest time of year. With the Muslim holy month of Ramadan about to begin, each day of fasting ends with a special meal called iftar.
And there are lots of dates here, you can see it. I just bought 6,000 bags.
But as those grocery prices continue to climb, so does the number of food bank users.
These days it's very tough.
They hope to serve 7,000 families this month. Many are new Canadians who have been hit hardest by rampant inflation.
Grocery bills and everything is very expensive.
It is very, very difficult to live, to get food for your family.
The latest numbers show Canadians are paying nearly 11% more for groceries. Prices are surging for juice, cereal, and dairy. But meat and veggies aren't rising as fast as before. StatsCan says bad weather is hurting supply. Higher costs for animal feed and packaging play a role too. Though there's also an ongoing debate over whether grocers are taking advantage of inflation to hike prices.
We may get some slower growth in food price inflation moving forward, but are we going to see an unwind? That seems less likely.
Household budgets are also being stretched by mortgage interest costs, up 24%. Though lower gas prices and plunging childcare costs are helping inflation cool. Economists say this gives the central bank room to hold interest rates steady.
The Bank of Canada is probably on an extended pause, but the good news for Canadians is that they're probably not going to be talking about rate hikes anymore.
Still, inflation isn't expected to hit the 2% target until next year. And with forecasts of a recession, plus the uncertainty of the current banking crisis, Canada's economy still faces challenges. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, starting today, you can now track your passport application online. Social Development Minister Karina Gould unveiled a new system that will free up more staff to process passports.
Starting today, if you have applied for a passport and provided your email address, you'll be able to check the status of the application at canada.ca/passport-status.
It is a self-serve tool, an online tracker that will let applicants check the status of their application online. Gould says processing delays have been virtually eliminated and that 99% of them are now completed on time. The pandemic had led to a lull in passport applications, but demand skyrocketed once restrictions began lifting. A key aide to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will be giving testimony about foreign interference in Canadian elections. Trudeau's chief of staff has agreed to appear before the Procedure and House Affairs Committee. The Liberals had been stalling the work of that committee in an effort to block the testimony. Now the other parties are claiming political victories. The CBC's Travis Danrash reports.
It took weeks of pressure for the Prime Minister to back down and flip-flop.
In question period, the Conservative leader took a victory lap. Katie Telford, the Prime Minister's chief of staff, will testify before a parliamentary committee investigating foreign election interference.
Will he allow Canadians to get to the truth and prevent this from happening again before the next election with a full public inquiry now?
Canadians know this is an extremely serious issue and should not be a partisan issue.
But partisan politics was on full display in the House.
We force this government to end the obstruction in committee and to allow the Chief of Staff of the Prime Minister to testify, rendering the Conservative motion useless, which is not surprising because they just want to play games.
Ms. Telford, any ideas on testifying?
For her part, Telford wasn't talking to reporters today. The Prime Minister insisting committee testimony from Telford isn't the best way to investigate the issue of foreign interference in elections.
The Conservatives are trying to gin up the toxicity and partisanship by making political theatre out of it and by catching Ms. Telford or others in not being able to answer direct questions.
She is a critical witness to get to the heart of the scandal, which is what did the Prime Minister know
When did he know about it? And what did he do or fail to do about Beijing's interference in our elections?
Telford won't appear before the Procedure and House Affairs Committee until after next week's budget. Trudeau says his focus remains on the work of former Governor-General David Johnston, who has been tasked with assessing the impact and extent of interference. Today, Johnston's mandate was unveiled. He'll examine the last two federal elections and assess whether the government did enough to defend Canada from foreign actors. He could also call for a full public inquiry and will reveal that decision by the end of May. Travis Stanrich, CBC News, Ottawa.
A scathing new report has been released in the United Kingdom about London's Metropolitan Police Force. It says Britain's biggest force has many cases of racism, misogyny, and homophobia. And that report outlines decades of abuse and incompetency by the city's officers. CBC's Abby Kuhadasan has the details.
It's not just a few bad apples. This independent investigation says Britain's largest police force is guilty of institutional racism, misogyny, and homophobia. Louise Casey led this investigation in the last year, and she says that this police force is a boys' club that needs structural reforms.
There is, without doubt, a discriminatory culture right across the Metropolitan Police, and I think that institutional racism, institutional sexism, institutional misogyny and homophobia are definitely present across the organisation. We think the Met is not able to assure all of us that its officers are of sufficient integrity and standards to be serving police officers, so it needs to clean itself up.
The report finds that Black Londoners are stopped and searched at excessive rates, that some officers overstuffed broken fridges with rape kits, making some evidence unusable. Female employees shared stories ranging from inappropriate touching by male colleagues to rape. A Sikh man had his beard trimmed by colleagues. A Muslim employee had bacon stuffed into his boots. And 1 in 5 Met employees say they've experienced homophobia.
Without them accepting those points, I can't see any way of moving forward. You have to understand what is wrong in order to know how to fix it. Members of the Black community, women, LGBTQ communities have personal experience of the way in which the Met polices us.
The Met Police Commissioner Mark Rowley addressing this report this morning. He says he accepts the findings. He apologized once again for the failings of his police force and said that they'll do everything they can to make major changes. But he did not acknowledge that the issue with the police force here in London is an institutional one. Abby Kuhadasan, CBC News, London.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump remains a free man tonight, despite his own prediction that he would be arrested today. A grand jury in New York continues to investigate accusations that Trump made illegal payments to an adult film actress to remain quiet about an alleged affair. That grand jury did not sit today, but Trump opponents and supporters were in the streets, and authorities are preparing for protests. CBC's Chris Reyes has the latest.
I'm in front of the criminal courthouse here in Lower Manhattan, where, if charged, former President Donald Trump would be arraigned, fingerprinted, mugshot, booked. But that's if he's charged. That's a big if. This case is before the grand jury, but an indictment is not a done deal. However, over the weekend, former President Donald Trump went to the social media platform Truth Social, posted that he expected to be arrested today. He called on his supporters to protest, and that's when all of this activity around me started to happen. NYPD barricading the building behind me, increased police presence. Today, a handful of those Trump supporters, small but very vocal. The possible charges that Trump could be facing has to do with so-called hush money paid to the adult film star Stormy Daniels back in 2016. That payment being booked as legal fees, that would be considered falsifying documents, a criminal charge. If that was intentionally hidden from voters, that would be another serious criminal charge. So all of this could happen anytime. We're waiting to see if this indictment is going to come down. The Republicans saying that this is another case of politicizing and weaponizing the justice system.
I look at it from this perspective. We live in America and it should be equal justice. This was personal money. wasn't trying to hide. This was 7 years ago, statute of limitation. And I think in your heart of hearts, you know, too, that you think this is just political. And I think that's what the rest of the country thinks, and we're kind of tired of that.
The police presence, the Trump supporters, you can expect all of this to remain here until a decision comes out. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
Well, it is the second day of Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit to Russia. Formal talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin are on the agenda. Putin praised China as Russia's most important economic partner. He said Moscow is ready to help Chinese businesses replace Western firms that have left Russia over the Ukraine war. The two leaders discussed China's peace proposal to end the war in Ukraine, one that has been widely condemned and dismissed by Ukraine's allies. They also spoke about Russia's plans to pump more gas to China via Mongolia through a new pipeline. Ottawa has banned TikTok from all federal devices based on concerns about its link to China. But the federal government hasn't pulled its advertising from the popular social media app. Some tech experts, that is, argue that is problematic. Sophia Harris has more.
Disinformation is false information.
A federal government public awareness campaign running on TikTok.
Get practical tips to identify disinformation at canada.ca/disinformation.
For some, it may seem surprising because Ottawa has blocked the app from all government devices over security concerns. The app's owner, ByteDance, is based in China, and the fear is China could force the company to share user data. But the federal government says it's still advertising on TikTok for things like emergency preparedness and armed forces recruitment because a third party posts the ads, so no government devices are involved.
I know your government announced.
After announcing the device ban, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said people might consider dropping TikTok.
I suspect many Canadians, from businesses to private individuals, will reflect on the security of their own data and perhaps make choices in consequence.
But some experts argue Ottawa is sending Canadians a contradictory message by continuing to advertise on TikTok.
It seems a little bit like a double standard to me to say, well, it's too dangerous for any of our employees to have, but it's okay for reaching teenagers.
I think it's going to be disappointing.
This public policy expert says Ottawa's continued ad campaigns look like an endorsement of TikTok.
I don't think it's the right use of tax dollars if we are, in fact, so newly serious and cautious about this one app.
Last year, Ottawa spent $1.7 million advertising on TikTok for things like voter registration awareness.
You got to understand who has control, what data you're giving it.
This tech expert says the government is smart to continue advertising on the popular app.
It's still a powerful platform. You do need to use these communication tools and platforms to reach your target demographics.
All provinces have also banned TikTok from government devices. Only Saskatchewan and BC say they're still advertising on the app. Sophia Harris, CBC News, Vancouver.
Still to come, the push to switch heavy-duty vehicles over to electric. We'll have more on how a company in the UK is driving that process. And meteorologist John Sauder will have his Manitoba forecast when we come back. Vehicles that are powered by gasoline and diesel fuel are significant producers of greenhouse gases. A lot of effort is being directed at getting passenger cars and light trucks switched over to electric power, but there are major gains to be made by converting larger vehicles like garbage trucks and heavy transports. Well, there is a UK company that is driving that process, and not only is it turning the trucks electric, it's also extending the life of the vehicles for even more carbon reduction.
Luna's Applied Technologies takes vehicles that already exist in the commercial vehicle space and re-engineers them and upcycles them to clean air powertrain. We're looking at product life extension, and we're looking to how to re-engineer this product to give it a future for multiple generations to enjoy. This factory here today that we're in, it has 1,100 vehicle capacity. That is an Eiffel Tower's worth of embedded carbon saved over a year. So if you put that into perspective and you actually go see the Eiffel Tower, you'll realize just how catastrophic it would be to replace all of these vehicles with new. Taking into account fleet operators, every one of these vehicles has a different duty cycle. Some councils or fleet operators have vehicles that do 25 miles a day, some 100 miles a day. So we've created a system where they can scale up and down the battery pack size. This has a 6-pack on this vehicle, 3 on each side, but this can be scaled back to 2, 3 or 4-pack facility. Now, if a fleet operator decides to change the route that the vehicle is on, you can just add capacity by adding 1 pack. This upcycling process is so important. It's normality in so many industries. You look at this in aviation, you look at this in rail. These are common practices. In automotive, we've been so used to this replace with new cycle, but there's 2 billion vehicles on this planet, and we're now transitioning from ICE to EV. This is the obvious choice for so many vehicle classes.
Meteorologist John Sauder's back, and you were talking about snow last time we chatted, and you're calling this a near miss for the city.
Yeah, it's just sort of grazing past the southeast corner of the province. So not such a near miss for areas like Piney and Sprague. The driving down on Highway 12 tonight will be pretty bad. This is how the storm is tracking. You can see the center of the low down over South Dakota right now. The snow is just north of that, moving into North Dakota and Minnesota tonight. Now, as you watch this system move, so I'll get out of the way and watch, we'll just track it together as it moves to the northeast into early tomorrow. Now, this is about midday Wednesday. Here's Winnipeg. Most of the snow at that point is on the Ontario side of the border, so still snowing heavily right through Kenora, Dryden, Sioux Lookout, and down through Fort Francis. And then as we move through Wednesday and on into Thursday, the storm is well off to the east, but it's going to live a long time. And boy, it is packing a punch, up to 25 centimeters for those areas around northwestern Ontario. Here in Winnipeg, only maybe 2 or 3. Temperature right now, -3. -1 at the Forks. So we're starting to see some temps here that are closer to seasonal. That would be +1. And then the current numbers across the rest of the region are a little bit cooler to the west. -7 in Brandon, -5 around Dauphin and Swan River. And right now in Kenora, -2. Same with Sprague, and that's the area that'll get the snow tonight and into tomorrow as well. Across the north, a pretty sunny day and fairly mild. A -19 in Churchill right now, -5 in Thompson. You can see the cloud has already moved into northwestern Ontario. The amounts, you know, you can add up what's going to happen tonight and tomorrow in northwestern Ontario, and you get those amounts in the 20 range. Tomorrow, generally 5, but look at these amounts tonight, up to 15 in Fort Francis, 10 to 15 in Dryden, and up to 10 tonight in the Kenora area. Now, for southeastern Manitoba, we've got light snow in Winnipeg. I was saying earlier, around 2 to 3 centimeters, 5 in Emerson, and in Steinbach, 5 to 10 in the southeast corner of the province, and not much at all out to the west. Either a chance of flurries or maybe a couple of centimeters around Portage, just on the western edge of that snow. And then across the north, we're looking at periods of light snow up through the west. Couple of centimeters tonight in the Thompson area, and then tomorrow all of that clears out. It's generally a sun cloud mix across the north and pretty spring-like temperatures. Lots of -2s and -4s. Brandon, some light flurries tomorrow at -4. The rest of us, some snow in the morning and then some clearing in the afternoon, including in Winnipeg. The clouds will stick around a little longer out into the southeast section of the province, and then we'll still see some more accumulating snow in northwestern Ontario, upwards of 2, maybe even 4 or 5 centimeters through the day.
John.
Thank you.
After years of pandemic restrictions and interruptions, music lessons are back in schools across the country. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson speaks to students and teachers about why that's so important and the challenges ahead.
1, 2, 3, 4. Jewel Castleman got to do something rare for a music teacher. Accept the special award honoring her work at the Junos.
Our winner is Jewel Castleman. Congratulations to you.
Though she says what music offers to her students is already rewarding enough.
It really benefits their brain growth and their creativity. It goes over into other subjects like social studies, history, and it's just very good to have that creative part of their mind being stimulated all the time with music.
Highlighting just how much music teachers do comes at a crucial time for music programs in schools.
In-person music classes, band and choir practices were canceled in schools during almost 2 years of the pandemic because of fears of aerosol spread of COVID-19. They were also among the last things to come back.
The average school receives less than $500 a year for their music program. When you add the 2 years on of the pandemic to that, in many schools, you have instruments that are literally unplayable and unusable.
And there's an impact on students that's tangible, says this Ottawa-based high school music teacher.
It caused us to lose out on students to play music, like students that don't know they're musicians because they never had the opportunity. And for many students, starting in music in schools is their only experience with it. Not everybody can afford music lessons privately.
These educators say what's needed is increased funding for music in public schools, something that's been on a downward curve for years in most provinces. The long-term benefits, they say, are countless, but so are the short-term.
I love that we get to try new things and new experiences. It's so great.
In music class, when music, you can find your voice.
Deanna Sumanak-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
U.S. President Joe Biden will make his first official visit to Canada this week since 2016. We will speak with a local expert on why security will likely dominate talks with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. That's just ahead. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. U.S. President Joe Biden will make his first official visit to Canada this week since 2016. National security is expected to be the focus of these talks, among other issues. It has been top of mind ever since last month's flurry of floating objects across North America. For more on this week's visit and the significance of it, we've reached Andrea Chiron, an associate professor of international relations at the University of Manitoba. First, I want to ask you, specific to NORAD, continental defense, what are you hoping comes up this week?
Well, I want to make sure that they reconfirm that it is, in fact, the priority for both Canada and the United States, and that perhaps we even start to see some timetables in terms of key steps that have to be taken. There are a lot of ambitious programs that have been announced, but without those dates, and especially because there's so much that needs to work in tandem, it's really important that we keep the pressure on. The concern is always that attention is going to divert from NORAD modernization, especially as we watch events overseas, especially in Ukraine.
Yeah, NORAD has been described as aging. Can NORAD, as we know it now, I guess, be fixed, or is it time to completely reorganize this binational program?
Well, in some cases, it's a matter of modernizing some of the technology, adding to it, linking more systems, making sure that more partners and allies can contribute to the information. But really what it is to reimagine and rethink what it takes to defend North America. We've often thought of it as a fireproof house and taken for granted that it is, in fact, very vulnerable.
Yeah, I think sort of these floating objects that we saw over the last month, I think kind of exposed some of the shortcomings. How much do you think those incidents will impact the discussions this week when it comes to the security of both of our countries?
Well, I think they will, one, because they've happened recently. Two, both publics in both Canada and the United States were certainly watching what was happening and are interested. And when your publics are interested in what's happening, then it often sharpens the minds of leaders to make sure that these challenges are addressed.
For sure. And when you talk about continental defense, whether it's air, land, how much does border security in particular play into this?
Well, it does as well. And of course, there's been a lot in the news about Roxham Road crossing and then the Safe Third Country Agreement. And so that will definitely be in the background as part of the discussions. But our borders are not just about securing the people, but also making sure that goods can travel across the border, because the CUSMA, the NAFTA 2.0, is the largest trading bloc in the world. And given high inflation, given calls that there may be a recession, and I would note the banking crisis that some of the U.S. banks are having, Canada and the U.S. are going to want to make sure that they continue this trade agreement with Mexico and that they have the right regulations in place to protect this important trade bloc.
What are you going to be watching for in terms of takeaways out of this meeting this week?
Well, I would like to see some concrete timelines. Of course, that rarely happens at the very highest levels. But again, a commitment that NORAD modernization and continental defense is the #1 priority, and that Canada and the U.S. are going to continue to work together with each other in mind, as opposed to simply working in parallel. Our economies, our defense systems, our security are just too interlocked for one partner to act ahead of the other.
Andrea Chiron, Associate Professor of International Relations at the U of M, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And CBC News will have special coverage of U.S. President Joe Biden's visit to Canada. Tune in for coverage of Biden's address to Parliament at noon on Friday. You can see that on CBC Television, CBC News Network, or on CBC Gem. All right, coming up, John Sauder has his 7-day forecast. We'll also have your daily lift when we return. Stay with us.
Well, we did get to -3 today, and that is the target for the next couple of days after a little bit of snow tonight into tomorrow morning. And then we're warming up toward week's end. A couple of sunny days, but breezy on Friday, -1s Friday and Saturday, and then -3s and -4s for Sunday through Tuesday next week. You know, twins often share an inseparable bond, and at a zoo in Tokyo, a pair of twin giant pandas will soon be heading out on their own.
They grow up so fast. They still have each other, though, for a little while, but will soon have to learn to live without mom. That is tonight's Daily Lift. Cameras captured the last day the public could see the twins spend time with their mother, Shin Shin. The young ones are undergoing training ahead of their final separation coming up at the end of this month. They've been kept apart from their mother for longer stretches of time. After the cubs are separated, they'll still have each other for a while, but eventually they'll have to learn to live apart. They're growing up.
They're growing up.
They're growing
I think
up.
that's pretty normal for panda families, right? To kind of split up, and that's how you're going to keep them, you know, sort of
Good for
alive.
them. They're thriving.
Yeah.
Thank you for being with us tonight. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you again at 11. Good night.
Good night.